Hi guys, Sean here from DigiDirect. Today we're stuck indoors due to drizzle, but we're going to be discussing the Canon EOS R. Now I've already done a hands-on first look at the EOS R where I discuss the specs and the features and so on. If you want to see a video like that, I'll link it in the description or up in the corners here. But today I'm going to be discussing a lot more about my impressions after having shot with the camera for a more extended period of time now. Now this was possible because Canon Australia recently had like an excursion event where they took people from various Australian camera retailers, took us up to an area for about a period of 2 days where we had an EOS R on hand the entire time, and they set up all these different shooting situations to try and allow us to shoot with the EOS R in various environments. So this video is going to be me sharing a lot of the photos and the video that I shot during that period and discussing my thoughts and impressions from that. So it might be a little bit less structured than one of my regular videos. Now it's worth saying, obviously this was a Canon trip that we were on. That's not going to color or bias my impressions of the camera. I'm just going to tell you how I felt while using it. Okay, well let's jump right into it. So the first thing they had us do was get a hold of our cameras and get used to them. I already used the EOS R, so I was fairly familiar with it, but I will say that I normally shoot on Micro Four Thirds, so I was a bit leery of lugging this camera around all day, or for 2 days really. While it is a mirrorless camera, the body and especially the lenses are not that much smaller than a DSLR. Happily though, I found it wasn't too big of a deal. The weight actually didn't really bother me. Setting up the camera, I had aperture and shutter speed on the regular body dials, and I assigned ISO to that new lens click wheel and the AF mode to the new touch bar, which meant I kind of had manual controls of everything that I really wanted to address, which was nice. In practice, I really liked the fully articulating screen, which is generally somewhat rare on a full frame camera. I was using it at the start to take some easy flat lay shots of this kind of interesting table setup they had. I used it again later for some astrophotography that we did, so it was really helpful. I didn't shoot much of myself at this event, but I do film these videos normally by myself, so having a fully articulating screen is critical, so it comes in handy for that kind of usage as well. Also, with an electronic viewfinder on this camera, I didn't have to chimp my shots, look at the back of the LCD every time I took a shot, because I could see them in the viewfinder, as well as I could even shoot video through the viewfinder. The resolution of the viewfinder is super high, it's very sharp, really easy to shoot with. Even if you're used to shooting optical, it's an easy transition. I also found myself primarily using the touch and drag AF functions as my primary way to move the AF point when shooting through the viewfinder. This is where I've got my eye to the viewfinder and I can touch the back of the screen with my thumb to move the focus point around. That worked quite well and I got used to it pretty fast, which is a good thing because the camera does not have an AF joystick on it like some other cameras. So one of the first things I tested here was the dual pixel autofocus in video with help of my colleague Steven here. As you can see, it performs exceptionally well. In fact, I used autofocus for all of the video clips that you're going to see here. I didn't use manual focus at all. To me, that's a pretty strong endorsement for the quality of the video AF system because on cameras that have inferior video AF systems, I often find myself reverting to manual focus pretty quickly out of frustration. I'm used to that, so it's easy to go back to it, but I didn't feel the need to do that here, which is nice. Note, we didn't have ND filters on hand to suit these lenses, so much of the video clips that you're going to see here have a higher frame rate than is ideal, so just keep that in mind. Another thing that I wanted to make a point to put through its paces was the new RF 50mm 1.2 lens, so I grabbed that right away to shoot one of our first activities, which was an Aborigine ceremony. So to start here, we had an elder putting ochre on people's hands. He was walking in and out of the crowd, only pausing very briefly at each person, but the autofocus was able to keep up and let me grab some quick shots here, which was nice. That was followed by a traditional dance sequence where I tested the burst shooting speeds. The camera tops out at 8 frames per second, but the buffer was very large, as you can see here. I can't remember if I ran the buffer all the way out here or if I just got tired of shooting, but this is just over 100 shots, which is about 12.5 seconds, so it's quite a long burst session. Next, we simulated a wedding shoot with natural light. I thought the 50mm did an amazing job here. I was shooting at f1.2 for pretty much all of these shots, so a super shallow depth of field, but the autofocus nailed the focus pretty much every single time. And where it is in focus, it's super, super sharp, really, really tack sharp, so I was really impressed with that. Also, it did a pretty good job at dealing with some backlighting from a bright sun here and controlled flaring quite well as well. Next up, we shot a gymnast who was doing a performance on silks and hoops and so on. For this one, I switched over to the RF 24-105 f4 so I could get a little bit more reach. This was interesting because there was a bit more movement in these shots. The gymnast was often slowly spinning, and this was also right at sunset, so we transitioned from doing kind of daylight shooting conditions to artificial light as the sun set. So these are the first examples of me starting to use some of the higher ISO settings on the EOS R, and I thought that it held up really, really well. I was wanting to keep a high enough shutter speed, obviously, to freeze movement in the dark conditions, so I was up at ISO 6400 or even above, and I think the quality here is still fantastic. It's really hard to really spot any degradation from any noise issues and so on. I think it really did a fantastic job. And even in these lower light conditions with the 24-105 lens, the AF was still on point. I would struggle to find an out of focus picture from all of these batches. So again, really, really good AF performance even in these lower light conditions. After that, we were brought to this very interesting scene with a pianist and a ballerina in this foggy room with dramatic lighting. Some pretty arresting visuals, but again, the autofocus kept up well with these decently difficult conditions. The fog kind of obscuring the subjects and so on, but it still did a really, really good job. I was continuing to shoot at these higher ISOs, again, not really seeing any degradation in the image quality as a result of that. Shot some more video here. Here's where I'll point out the crop factor in 4K. So you can see as I go from 1080 50p here to 4K, we can see that 1.7 times crop. I'm back on the 50mm lens again now. So with the 1.7 times crop, that's about an 85mm equivalent. That's definitely going to be a strong negative for some people. I will make the argument though that it depends heavily on what you're shooting. The crop is primarily an issue when you want to be shooting wide. If you're going to be doing that often, then this is definitely going to be a problem. But if it's not as much of a concern for you, you may find that the crop doesn't bother you that much. Put it this way, I shoot a lot of video. Once I got used to the crop on this camera, it didn't bother me that much. There weren't too many situations where I really felt it hindered my ability to shoot. But like I said, it's going to be a problem for some people for sure. The rest of the night we had some similar shooting conditions. We had this creepy red lit trailer, again dark conditions, unusual lighting, still really good autofocus performance and low ISO performance as well. We did a little bit of astrophotography as well, where I found the fully articulating screen to be super useful. For the Astro, I was actually using the Canon EF 11-24mm lens with an adapter. It's worth noting I didn't really notice much performance difference when using the native RF lenses versus using this EF lens via an adapter. This is obviously a wide-angle lens, so it's not maybe the same as testing out a 70-200 or so on, but I found that the performance was quite good with the adapter, no noticeable differences. I'll also mention that the battery life was pretty good. It wasn't incredible, but I filled up about 80 gigabytes worth of SD cards on one battery. I only had to change the batteries once throughout the time with the camera, and that was right at the end. So I thought it did a pretty decent job with the battery life. Overall, spending more time with the EOS R really improved my perception of the camera. I already thought it was quite good, but getting to test it in these challenging conditions and having it consistently perform well was really, really nice to see. My biggest takeaways was that I was really impressed with the autofocus, the high ISO performance, the lens quality, and the ergonomics. So the autofocus, including video autofocus, really did not let me down the entire time, regardless of available light, movement, so on. Well over 90% of the shots that I took are right on focus, even though I was often shooting at f1.2. It just really could deal with anything that we threw at it here, which was nice. I also don't have a single image where I would consider noise to be an issue, even a single image where I would consider noise to be really noticeable, even though I shot a lot at ISO 6400 and above. The sharpness and the picture quality also of these new lenses were fantastic. Really, really like the 50 in particular. It's not a cheap lens, but it's clearly a super high quality lens. Canon is saying that it's their sharpest lens ever. And just the ergonomics between the new lens dials, the touch bar, the standard dials that I'm used to, I found the controls and the ergonomics to be really, really fast. Within an hour or two, I was jumping around the camera as if I'd been using it for a long, long time. So I thought that was a really, really nice feature as well. Like I said, the 4K crop was maybe the most significant negative that I found in my time shooting with it. Again, it didn't even bother me too much, but I know it will some other people. So I hope you found this video helpful. Hopefully sharing some of those sample images and videos from these more difficult shooting situations has been instructive. And as I mentioned, I do have a more spec and feature-focused video on the EOS R also out already. That's linked in the description if you want to check that out. The camera did just come out last week, so it is in stores now. If you want to try it out for yourself, give it a play, please feel free to visit one of our DigiDirect stores. We've got stores in the Sydney CBD, Bondi Junction, Miranda, the Brisbane and Melbourne CBD, and Cannington, Western Australia. You can also order the EOS R on our website at www.digidirect.com.au. Thanks guys, take care.